Welcome everyone to the second session in day 3 of MBA Spotlight here on GMAT Club. So I'm super excited to be hosting Laurel from Yale SOM here to give us a bit of an insight into the Yale SOM MBA school and into the program and what you can expect if you were to apply to Yale over the next application cycle and what differentiates Yale from the other schools. So a few things I want to mention before I hand over to Laurel. The first one is, could you please like this video if you do like it at the end? If you don't like it, thumbs down. We're fine with that, but it just helps us understand if we're doing a good job because we're here to support you guys through the MBA application process. So if there's anything that we can do better, please let us know. And a good way for us to understand if we're doing a good job is if we see the likes or if we see the dislikes. Another thing to mention, subscribe to the channel as well, so we can, again, continue to offer the support for you guys during the application process. If you've got questions, this is obviously going to be quite a big part of the session. We've already got some pre-submitted questions that we'll be answering in the Q&A session after the presentation is done. But you can also be asking questions via the chat function to the right-hand side, and then we'll answer those questions with the pre-submitted questions as we go through the Q&A session. I appreciate that there's likely going to be questions that we don't get to just because of time. So fortunately, Yale will be doing a Zoom session next week on the 22nd, 10 a.m. Pacific. So if there's anything that we don't get to, apologies, but feel free to dial into that session next week to get your questions answered. So without further ado, I'll stop yapping and I'll hand it over to Laurel, who's going to give you a great presentation about Yale SOM.
Thank you so much, Linda. I appreciate it. And welcome everyone who's joining us today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Laurel Grodman. I'm Managing Director of Admissions at the Yale School of Management. I am also a proud graduate of Yale SOM, class of 2006. So I'm so happy to have the opportunity to talk to you today about the school, the program. As Linda mentioned, I will try to keep things relatively brief so that we have plenty of opportunity to get your questions answered. So I will take the next 10 or 15 minutes or so to, like I said, tell you about the school, the program, the culture, the community. I'll touch upon the application process as well at the end, and then we'll open it up to questions. And so with that, I think in any time that I'm talking about the Yale School of Management, I think the best place to start is always with mission, because at Yale SOM, our mission really does matter. And that mission is, and always has been, to educate leaders for business and society. That means we aim to develop leaders who can think broadly about the challenges we face in an increasingly complex world and who have the ability to be decision makers in environments that call for multiple stakeholders, influencers, and consequences. And we believe our mission has never been more relevant than it is today. So in support of that mission, there are really 3 things about the Yale SOM experience that make it distinctive among top MBA programs. And each one of those exists so that we can put our mission into practice in very real ways every day. And those are that we are the business school that is most integrated with our home university, Yale University. We are the most distinctively global US business school. And we aim to be the best source of elevated leaders for all sectors and regions. And so I'll spend the next few minutes touching upon each of these distinctive features and how they will benefit you during your time at Yale SOM. So starting off with our integration with our home university, Yale University. When you join the Yale SOM community, you truly are a member of the broader Yale University community and all the opportunities and privileges that come with that. And in my mind, the way that this manifests most dramatically is through your experience of the curriculum. So in the second year of your curriculum, that year is comprised entirely of elective courses. And those courses can be taken in any quantity, in any classroom throughout the entire university. So if you have an interest in learning Mandarin, you can take language courses at Yale College. If you have an interest in sustainability, you can take courses at the Yale School of the Environment. One of the most popular courses for our students outside the School of Management is actually a course at the world-renowned Yale School of Drama in visual storytelling. And so the majority of our students will take at least one course outside of Yale during their time in school, and many will take more than that. And there's also a percentage of our students each year who are actually pursuing a dual degree with another program at Yale at the same time as they're at Yale SOM. And that can be with the School of Public Health, the Architecture School, School of the Environment, Law School, and several other programs as well. And so if you're interested in pursuing a dual degree, that's wonderful. And if you're sitting next to someone who's pursuing a dual degree in your classroom, that's also a really great experience because they're in the process of studying another subject matter very deeply. And that's only going to add to the richness of your classroom conversation. And so I focus primarily about in the classroom, but there are tons of opportunities to connect across Yale outside the classroom as well. Our students host major conferences with students from other areas of the university, such as the Yale Healthcare Conference, which is a partnership between students from SOM and from the medical school and the School of Public Health. It's the largest student-run conference on the entire campus. There are opportunities to start businesses with students and faculty from across the university through the SCI Center for Innovative Thinking at Yale, which is our entrepreneurial hub for the university. There are myriad speakers who come through campus every year, and you have access to all of them. And so the idea here is that you're getting a truly multidisciplinary, multifaceted approach to your business school education, and all of Yale is open to you in order to curate that and put that together. So moving on, the next sort of distinctive feature that I mentioned is our global nature. And so I think that these days, most business schools aim to teach global business, and some even have a partnership with an international business school to help facilitate this. Rather than take this somewhat narrow approach, 7 years ago, Yale SOM took the lead in establishing what we call the Global Network for Advanced Management, which really cracked open the opportunity for innovation in the global business education space. The Global Network for Advanced Management is a partnership network of 32 schools across 6 continents and gives our students access to top business schools around the world and each school's competitive advantage in pretty much every major market that you can imagine. And the global network really serves as the fuel for what we call our global studies requirement. Yale SOM was actually the very first school to require each of our students to have some kind of deep global engagement during the time that they are here. Of course, some of this has necessarily had to look a little bit different over the course of the last year as travel has been restricted, but many of these offerings we've actually been able to deliver in some kind of a virtual format as well. And so I'm not going to go into depth on every single one of these. I'm happy to answer questions about them in the Q&A. But many of these options are fueled by our global network connections. I'll highlight one in particular that we have been able to execute on this past year even, but would typically be an in-person experience. So Global Network Weeks convene students from across the global network schools for concentrated weeks. Several global network schools will host these at any given time. They happen 3 times a year. And the subject matter tends to be an area of that local school's expertise, their faculty expertise. And so you may learn about some recent ones included entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship in China, which was hosted at Fudan University, strategic innovation and management in emerging markets, which was hosted at EGADE in Mexico. And so what's really fantastic about these is you're not only learning from professors coming from a school in a different context from you, but you're sitting in a truly global classroom. You may have 4 or 5 other Yale students with you there, but you're primarily in a classroom with people from across the global network, and they're bringing the perspectives that they're gaining from their school and from the geography in which they're going to their MBA program as well. Some of these other options, like international experience course, we've had to put on hold, but I expect when the world opens up again, we will have the opportunity to once again have travel as an important component of all of these experiences. All right, so moving on to the final feature that I think really makes our program distinctive. In some ways, this is the hardest to quantify, but I think it gets at the very heart of your experience here. So hopefully you're getting a sense of how important connectedness is to our mission, whether it's being connected across campus or connected globally. Our unique integrated curriculum is yet another connective force, and one that's designed to allow you to look at problems from different facets through different lenses and be the sort of leader who can apply that thinking to the problems that you'll encounter. So the courses at the heart of our integrated curriculum are called the organizational perspectives because they look at how organizations work through the lens of various constituencies. So you'll see courses like the customer, the investor, the executive, and so on. In addition, the courses approach organizational challenges by drawing on multiple academic disciplines at once. So as an example, I'll show you the core course, Sourcing and Managing Funds. This course is co-taught and covers functions such as accounting, finance, operations, and strategy. Oh, I think I might need to, oh, I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself there. Sorry about that. And so once again, the courses integrate multiple organizational perspectives, which is much more reflective of how you'll encounter challenges in the real world. Most business school curricula are organized very much like their academic departments are. So things like marketing, finance, accounting, operations, and so on. And while this may have been more reflective of what post-business school careers looked like 20 or 30 years ago when these curricula were developed, the jobs that you'll inhabit and probably are inhabiting already in your careers look quite different from this. Very rarely are you presented with a neat challenge that's a marketing problem or operations problem. You've got big, messy, exciting problems ahead of you. And the idea is that you really have to apply multiple lenses and integrate multiple perspectives in order to have the best chance of solving those problems effectively. I mentioned co-teaching is one application of the integrated perspective here. Another important feature that I'd point out of our curriculum is Yale's unique raw case methodology. So many of you who've been researching business schools are probably familiar with traditional business school cases, which tend to be focused in a single discipline and give you all the information you need to solve a set of questions or issues related to the problems at hand. And while this can definitely be a useful teaching strategy, it's not necessarily reflective of how you'll encounter challenges in the real world. So at Yale SOM, we have developed in-house a set of what we call raw cases. And these cases are big and messy and immersive and contain a ton of information presented to you digitally. And so you'll have primary sources and secondary sources, financial statements, interviews with key stakeholders, media clippings, and so on. And you have more information than you need and more than you can possibly go through on your own. So you'll work with teams to sift through and identify the relevant information to solve the problems at hand. And because these cases are so big and involved and rich, you can actually look at the same case from multiple organizational perspectives courses and be looking at different issues and thinking about how to compare and contrast the information that you would need for one perspective versus another. This is definitely a heavier lift, I think, for our faculty and our case writing team, and I would argue for our students as well, but it's much more reflective of how you'll encounter challenges in the real world. And so I have been focused primarily on the academic experience at Yale SOM, but I would be remiss if I didn't highlight the Yale SOM community as a part of what makes our program so special. Having worked at Yale SOM for over a decade now and having been a student myself, I've experienced this community as a bright, ambitious, and collaborative community of diverse individuals who tend to take an interest, and a real interest in one another's passions and pursuits. It is a group of people who challenge each other, always with the goal of getting to better mutual understanding, and who are really eager to learn from one another. And I think it takes a certain type of student to be excited by and open to that kind of environment. But rather than hearing me talk about it, I always think that the best way to get to know a community is to interact with members there. Obviously, that looks a little bit different as we're still in the limitations of COVID times, but there's still plenty of opportunities to get to connect with members of the Yale SOM communities and learn about their experience. So on our website, you can find a list of student ambassadors who are available to connect with prospective students. We host events virtually all throughout the summer. I'll draw particular attention to, we'll be hosting an open house kind of week kicking off on July 12th with a number of events, including another school overview, an opportunity to do a walkthrough of our application because it'll be around the time that our application goes live. opportunities to connect with others in the community. So I encourage you to check that out as well. So I will, before I break, I'll say a few words about the application process itself, and I will happily answer any questions around this more specifically. But just as an overview, I expect our application will go live in early July, and you'll have a chance to kind of walk through the specifics there. But from a high level, we are looking to understand three primary things. We're looking to understand your academic preparedness for what is a very, very rigorous academic program. We are looking to understand your professional experience and how you've demonstrated your potential to both lead and collaborate within the professional experiences that you've held to date. And we're looking to understand how you are going to interact as a community member. We're looking to bring people into our community who are excited to engage with one another, who have taken an active role in the communities they've been a part of in the past, and who we can anticipate will continue to do so, both as their time as a student at Yale SOM and as an alum in all of the organizations you will join from here on out. And so all of the factors of the application ultimately give us information about one or multiple of those three things. And so we are asking you for a resume that describes your professional and academic experiences. We have one essay question. We will continue to use the essay question that we've used for the last several years, which asks you to describe the biggest commitment you have ever made. We found it to be a really fruitful essay topic. It's one that we developed in conjunction with one of our organizational behavioral professors, Amy Rosneski, and it gives us a really clear sense of how you have approached commitment in the past, because obviously business school and what you intend to do from here on out is a major commitment. And so it's useful for us to understand what approach you've taken to major commitments in your life here to date. We ask for 2 letters of recommendation, both from professional sources, a GMAT or GRE score. We are test agnostic, so either score we are happy to receive. Your transcripts that outline all of your academic experiences to date. We ask you for a very short statement about your career interests. These last 3 I'll touch upon in a little bit more depth because they're somewhat unique to our application process. So and they all become after you hit submit. So video questions are a series of 3 questions that you will answer. They're recorded by a member of our admissions team. So you'll hear a question, you'll have about 20 or 30 seconds to think about your response. And then depending on the question, either 60 or 90 seconds to deliver a response. They are fairly straightforward questions. They're not meant to be brain teasers or cases or anything designed to trip you up. It gives us a chance to do a couple of things to hear a little bit about how you think on your feet. Your ability to articulate yourself is a valuable skill in an MBA classroom and beyond. For those who are non-native English speakers, it gives us a chance to hear your spoken language ability. We don't require an English language test, and so we find that this is a pretty effective way to be able to gauge English language ability in the spoken sense. And so, like I said, it's really nothing to get nervous about. If you're in the process of preparing for your MBA interviews, you should be more than prepared to answer the video questions themselves. The next sort of unique component that comes after you hit submit of our application process is what we call our behavioral assessment. And this is a non-cognitive assessment. So as opposed to a GMAT or a GRE, which is a cognitive test, behavioral assessment is a non-cognitive assessment that looks at your interpersonal and intrapersonal skills. What that means for you is you will go through a series of 120 questions that go pretty quickly, and each one asks you to read 2 separate statements, and for each, pick the one that you think better describes you. It's not something that you need to overthink or dwell on. You're intended to move pretty quickly. The entire test takes about 20 minutes. It doesn't require any preparation. Unlike all of the other testing that you'll do, you can just sit down, make sure you have 20 minutes to focus on it and move on. And what the behavioral assessment really allows us to do, and the work that we've done behind the scenes in assessing this, is it actually allows us to better predict than things like GPA and GMAT alone who will be able to perform in the MBA classroom. And what it ultimately allows us to do is actually take a chance on candidates whose testing or academic history may not give us all the confidence we need on your ability to perform in the classroom. And so the behavioral assessment will sometimes give us that extra bit of information that lets us have confidence that a given applicant will be able to perform in the MBA classroom in the way that we want to set them up for success. So that's a little bit more about the behavioral assessment. And then lastly, interviews. So our process for interviews is by invitation only. We review applications beginning when we receive them on the deadlines, not before that. And then we extend interview invitations throughout the entire round. And so I know some people get nervous when they haven't heard from us after a while, but there always has to literally be a first and last application reviewed. And so it very often just does come down to when an individual application goes under review. And we will, anyone who is admitted to the Yale School of Management will have interviewed, but we do not interview every single applicant who comes through. The last thing that I will put up here, this is actually brand new, hot off the presses. I don't even think it's published on our website at this point, but these are our application deadlines for the coming year. They will be published on our website pretty soon, but I just updated them for our purposes right here. So you'll see our round 1 deadline coming up first is September 14th of this year. I often get questions about when's the best round to apply. The answer is very simply when you feel like you've got your strongest application put together. There is absolutely no difference in your odds of getting in between round 1 and round 2. We have plenty of room for lots of qualified candidates in each of them. I put a small caveat around round 3, which is a little bit more subject to just room in the class, depending on who has made the choice to enroll from our round 1 and round 2 offers of admission. And so round 3 can be the right choice for you still if you need that additional time to put together the strongest application. But if you feel like you are good to go and have that application in place, round 1 or round 2 is probably your best bet. So with that, I'm going to pause, leave up our contact information. And Linda, I'm happy to start taking questions.
Yep, perfect. Thank you so much, Laurel, for sharing that great presentation about Yale SOM. So a quick thing before we jump into the Q&A session, God, getting tongue-tied, was that we are giving away some free GMAT club tests and forum quizzes. So the link has been posted in the chat. So if you guys can sign up and you can have the opportunity to win a GMAT club test, which is very, very helpful for those who are studying for the GMAT. So let's jump straight into the questions.
Sure.
So we'll start with some questions that we had pre-submitted on the GMAT club forum.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one that we've got is relating to the pandemic. And obviously there have been people who have been, more affected by others, especially from a job perspective. So how do admissions at Yale SOM view a candidate that has been laid off from a job and subsequently hasn't been employed for the past few months due to the pandemic?
That's a great question, and one that we have consulted closely with our career development office to understand rather than make assumptions about what to do with that kind of information. I mean, maybe the unsatisfying answer is it really depends on the individual circumstances. And so I think that there is obviously a broader understanding that people's job trajectories are going to look different during the pandemic. Obviously, the situation that we've been in for the last year and a half has affected different industries in different ways. And so we are, like I said, in close consult with our career development office, often on individual cases to really understand what's going on, because there are industries where obviously there have been more layoffs, but perhaps still lots of opportunity out there, and others where it makes more sense that there would be an extended employment gap. So we're really thinking about what individual job you were occupying and what the circumstances were, and whether it's reasonable to expect that however long your employment gap has been, 3, 6, 9 months, whatever it might be, is that a reasonable gap for the industry that you are in, and the job prospects given where your geography is, and all of those sorts of things. So again, it depends. But what I'll say is it's certainly not a universal deal breaker, if you will. Again, we understand that there are different circumstances in different industries in different parts of the world that are going to be affecting employment. So we're thinking about the duration, we're thinking about your industry, we're thinking about your individual circumstances, and whether it made sense for you to have been able to pursue something else during that time. I will say, though, during the time you're unemployed, it is very helpful to hear what you have been doing. And so obviously job searching, we recognize, is going to be a big piece of that. But if you've been involved in other activities or opportunities, or if you're doing some part-time work or consulting or working on a project-based initiative, that's all very helpful for us to understand too, and certainly a positive in our being able to view that time. Because ultimately, we're trying to look at this the way that a post-MBA employer would. This is more about understanding what are your prospects for employment on the back end of your degree. And that's what you should be thinking about as well. And so it may make sense in some circumstances to regain employment and to be working for some period of time, before starting business school, because it will help you on the back end there. So again, it really depends, but it's not a universal no.
Thank you for shedding some perspective on that. I'm sure there's a lot of people who are looking to get some feedback on that particular question. So moving on to our next question. It goes, I know that Yale SOM is all about diversity, but if you were to standardize the profile of an SOM candidate, what are the common skills, or SOM student who's been accepted, what are the common skills and qualities that they possess?
Oh, that is a really hard question, because I think the first part of that is spot on. We are not looking for a particular profile of student, because then we would have a very monolithic student body. And I think one of the hallmarks of our student population is that it's comprised of people who don't follow the herd and do follow their own passions and are interested in what one another is doing, in part because it's different from what you're doing. And so it is really, really hard to think about a common denominator in that way. It's certainly, what I'll say is it's certainly not something that comes through or that we're vetting for in the application process. What I think tends to unify our students is a sense of purpose. I think, I started the presentation talking about mission and how this really is a school where mission matters. It's not just words that we throw up on a presentation. This sense of, your reason for getting management education is so that you can be a leader for business and society is a real kind of unifying and energizing force, I think, among all of our students. And they bring a different sense of that. It doesn't mean that you're going into a particular sector or industry or type of role post-MBA, but I think most of our students come with a sense of, I want to do something that has meaning to me, and I want to feel a sense of purpose above and beyond just making widgets, in my work and my engagements, during and after school. And so I think that that's the commonality that I tend to see. But again, it's not something that we specifically vet in the application process. I think it's what ultimately attracts people to enroll at Yale.
Yeah. Thank you for that response. So we have a question from Parth, and it would be, I guess, again, linked to COVID. And well, there's two questions. One was linked to COVID and concerns over how it's affected class size moving forward. But this one particularly is about what the Adcom would recommend for applicants who were waitlisted last year.
So first, I'll say thank you for considering reapplying. We love to see reapplicants, and we hope we've kept you engaged and interested in the school so that you're interested in pursuing a shot in the class in the coming year. Hopefully, as someone who's been on the waitlist, you've taken advantage of the opportunity to get feedback on your application from the waitlist process. We do encourage our waitlisted candidates to reach out to through the waitlist process and get specific feedback on your application, because sometimes there are targeted things that you can work on, sometimes there's space to do that within an application cycle, and sometimes you need a little bit more time to address some of the areas of feedback that we give. Sometimes the feedback is simply that we don't have room to admit every single qualified candidate, and we do need to make judgments. And so if you get that sort of feedback, I know it can be somewhat unsatisfying to not have a specific thing to work on, but as a reapplicant in the coming year. So obviously, if you get feedback, that's the thing to focus on. And if the feedback is sort of more general, it just came down to a competitive pool, I think you continue to focus on the things that you focused on in this application and continue to fine tune them. And again, it all comes back to that academic preparedness, the evidence of your ability to lead and collaborate in your professional lives, and your desire to be an involved community member. And so presumably some span of time has passed between your initial application and your next one, and probably things have changed in your life. You've probably done more at work, taken on more responsibilities, worked on new projects. So those are things that you're going to want to highlight. Maybe if you got feedback that was in the academic realm, you've had a chance to take some coursework outside of work, or you've retaken the test, or whatever it might be that you've that might have been updated or changed there. If you've reapplied within the last 2 years, we'll have you fill out a reapplicant essay, which is just a brief opportunity to give us those updates and make them explicit. You shouldn't assume someone is sitting there and comparing one application to another and to look for what's changed. More likely than not, whoever's reading your application in the subsequent year has not seen, was not the reader on your application the prior year. So make it crystal clear what has changed and what's updated, and really use that opportunity. We try to make this a little bit easier for you. You have the option to port over your old letters of recommendation. You can choose to use other elements of the application that are the same, such as your essay. There's no right or wrong answer as to whether to do that. You know yourself best, and whether those are things that still apply and best showcase your application, or if you want the opportunity to present new information on those fronts. Again, that's not, there's no judgment call about what is the right thing to do there universally. We just give you that option. I will say, reapplicants have had pretty high success rates in the past. I think the ability to get that feedback and be able to take action and make the decision about whether it makes sense to reapply in the coming years is a helpful thing.
Yes, most definitely. Thanks for the very comprehensive answer. Yeah. Our next question is regarding, I guess, employment post the MBA. And specifically about how the makeup is in the different sectors of employment. So unemployment trends for Yale SOM, the general management placements seem to have changed from 2010 to 2020. They've dropped 27% to 11%. Do you have a reason why it shifted away from general management and likely to other areas of employment?
That's a good question. I'm trying to think if there would be a sort of a clear-cut explanation for that. I mean, so general management falls under sort of when you look at our career placement functionally, and the other way to look at career placement is industry-wise. And so my guess is that some of the shifts that we've seen on the industry front may be what's driving kind of the classification of jobs that people are seeing on the outside on the post MBA front. So one thing that comes to mind, which is probably to no one's surprise, there's been a significant increase in the number of jobs that people have taken in the technology sector between 2010 and now. And many of those jobs probably aren't even classified under technology. If you look at the employment report, they're taking sort of tech-focused jobs across a variety of industries. And I mean, one hypothesis I have is that those jobs just tend to be a little bit less functionally categorized as general management and may fall under kind of different disciplines. Again, I'm sort of speculating here. I don't think it's anything specifically about the school or the curriculum that would have pushed people in that direction. Another hypothesis, again, not looking at the underlying data, is if we've had an increase, as many schools have over the last 10, 15 years in number of graduates who are going into various forms of consulting, that wouldn't be categorized as general management. There's sort of a consulting or internal strategy function that would fall under. And so that could explain it as well. But again, there's nothing that strikes me as sort of related to the school or the interests of our students. If anything, I think our curriculum has always been extremely well suited, the integrated curriculum, to careers in general management because they are interdisciplinary in nature. And so I think it probably has a little bit more to do with some of those other factors that I mentioned.
Thanks a lot for that. Yeah, it's a challenging question to answer because you can't really find a root cause and you don't know how much it's spanning to, I guess, other schools as well. So, but thank you so much for the hypotheses that you did give. So a question from Parth relating to COVID, wanting to know about the deferrals and the policies that Yale have with regards to COVID.
Well, hopefully, fingers crossed, the next fall, so the fall of 2022, enrollment will look a lot different from these last 2 years, and that I truly hope that we're not having to navigate these challenges that we've seen on the public health and immigration fronts that we have in the last couple of years. We have tried to take a very sort of sensitive approach over the last 2 years to understanding where people are, and sort of much like that unemployment question, it really comes down to individual circumstances, and trying to understand where you are, what your ability is to arrive on time for the school year. And so I'll say for the previous cycle, so the students who enrolled last summer and are here this summer, we had basically a natural extension of our typical deferral policy, which has always allowed for deferrals based on challenges to obtain a visa or arrive on time for classes on site in the program, and has always sort of allowed for things like military deployment and personal or family health issues. But notably, we do not provide deferrals for people who are looking to pursue other kind of employment or academic opportunities. So that's remained the same. So I think what the sort of relevant piece in light of COVID has been sort of an extension of that policy for people who were having trouble arriving due to immigration challenges. And so. And so again, we evaluated each case really on an individual basis to understand where the student was in terms of pursuing pursuing their visa and what challenges they were coming up against. And we provided deferrals to those who it was kind of clear were not going to be able to arrive on campus in sort of a reasonable amount of time, and who did not. For those who were not able to arrive at the start of the school year, but were able to arrive later, there was a hybrid option, because as the entire class experienced this past fall, we always maintained some on-campus coursework and presence, but it wasn't everybody in the classroom at the same time. And so whether you were, literally remote in another location and attending virtually, or on campus, but on an off day, there was always a remote option for participating in class. We are, I think within the next couple of days, going to give an update to our enrolled students about our, what that policy is going to look like for this year. So I don't want to kind of get ahead of myself before that's been kind of formally announced. But what I'll say is I don't expect there to be a huge impact on the enrolled class from here on out. I think most people will be able to get here on time. That actually was our experience last year. The majority of people, even despite all the immigration challenges from last summer, were able to get to campus either on time or near the start of the school year. And my expectation is it will be similar this year. And so I think we'll have some group of students likely who, as we do in any given year, who have individual circumstances that require a deferral. But if the underlying question here, I guess, is, are we going to have filled half the class for next year based on deferrals from this year? That's not what happened this previous year, and it's not at all what I anticipate happening this coming year.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm sure that puts a lot of people at ease, because I know that's a question that many applicants, especially this coming year, have been worrying about because of the high volume of applicants last year, and then also the impact of COVID.
I probably should have just led with that. You don't need to worry that the class will be full or near full or really significantly impacted in any way by deferrals from carried over from this year.
Perfect. Thank you. So I guess moving on to internship opportunities. So what kind of support does Yale SOM provide for students when it comes to internship opportunities?
Yeah, a lot. I should have mentioned at the start of this session, I actually spent 4 years working in our career development office before joining admissions. And so I had, and I really loved the opportunity there to get to partner with our students on their career searches, because it's such an exciting time and it's such a big piece of why you enter the business school process. It's also a high anxiety time, and it was rewarding to be able to support our students during that time and help them forge what would be their next step coming out of an M.B.A. program. And so I think that the support comes primarily from two places. So the first is the career development office, which is staffed with a wonderful team who does a lot of both group and one-on-one support. So there's certain career search kind of fundamentals that regardless of what industry it is or whatever your dream job might be, you need to be able to put together a resume, to tell your story, to put together a cover letter, to interview effectively. So these are sort of universal skills that you'll need to build regardless of your individual career aspirations. And so the career office has programming that helps you with all of those steps along the way. Beyond that, though, the Career Development Office does a lot of individual advising. They do literally thousands of individual counseling appointments with you to help really tailor your search and get at what you need and help you prepare in the ways that you need. And I think because Yale SOM career outcomes tend to be so varied across so many different industries and functions, there are, the school has built up a lot of expertise in helping with your very kind of special and unique job search, rather than saying, well, most people go into finance and consulting, so that's kind of what we do, and that's what we know how to prepare you for. I really think kind of where the office shines the most is really helping you in your individual search. In addition to the Career Development Office, though, and all the work they do, and obviously all the work they do to develop partnerships and relationships with employers, there's also the student side of things. And so you'll be highly engaged in the professional clubs that provide a ton of support based on your individual career aspirations across pretty much any industry function you can imagine. There are second-year career coaches or career advisors who partner with the Career Development Office to give you, again, a more individualized support. And they've been through that process. In general, second-year students are a great resource because they've just been through this process and can share a lot of their own insights and experience from having gone through this so recently. And so I think those are the two primary sources. Sometimes they work together. There's, again, back when we can be on the road once more. Career treks are a very kind of popular way to get to know companies and industries, and those tend to be created in partnership between student clubs and the Career Development Office. And it's an opportunity to spend a little bit of time within an organization and see what it's like on the ground and hear from employees and alums. And so those are some of the ways that come to mind.
Thank you. So we have time for 1 to 2 more questions.
Okay.
So I'm just looking at the YouTube stream coming through. I'll go to a pre-submitted one. So if someone has a relatively lower GPA than average, how would you advise them to overcome that? Or how would you advise them to kind of display to the Adcom that they're able to handle the curriculum at Yale SOM?
Sure, that's a good and not uncommon question. And so hopefully, hopefully you know that the GPA is not just a kind of a one and done piece of information that is going to be kind of an up or down vote for an individual candidate. We truly do look at your entire academic history in conjunction with your testing to understand whether you have the potential to succeed in the classroom at Yale SOM. And so that may be helpful in and of itself. It may be that you have a lower GPA because you struggled in the earlier semesters at school, but have a real upward trajectory. And by the time you graduated, we're really kind of going strong and hit your stride. So that's important for us to see as well. If there are circumstances that we should know about that help us put a little bit of context to your academic experience, that's a great thing to mention in your optional statement. And to give us a little bit more of a sense, maybe there was an isolated semester or two where something was going on that affected your grades. That's helpful to know. Or if just sort of the trajectory of your grades is not what we would have expected or requires a little bit more explanation, certainly let us know about that. Sometimes your grades are just your grades, and it's something you can't go back and redo, and you just have to, live with that and move on and think about what you can do otherwise. The test is an opportunity to provide a counterpoint to your GPA. I don't think that they're interchangeable, and sitting for an exam is not the same as 4 years of undergraduate experience, but it's another counterpoint. And it's for those who are not satisfied with their undergraduate performance, it can be a good way to demonstrate academic proficiency in another, more recent context. There might be opportunity to take some coursework to supplement your undergraduate experience. I think quantitative coursework tends to be an area of focus for this, either if you didn't have the exposure or you didn't do well in it as an undergrad. Courses like statistics and microeconomics are tremendously helpful coming into a program. You don't need to have had them before you apply. It's certainly not a prerequisite, but individually, I would have found it helpful to have had a micro course, for instance. The first time I ever saw economics was at Yale SOM. And again, you can do that, but I think back to myself, it really would have been nice to have had some preparation there before getting started. So I give that advice universally, not judgmentally, but if you have had a relatively lower GPA coming out of undergrad, those could be some of the areas that you might want to focus.
Thank you, Laurel. I guess I should tie up the session now. Before I close everything out, is there anything that we'd like to mention to all the MBA hopefuls out there looking to apply to Yale SOM?
Well, thank you once again for your interest and for joining today. And as I mentioned earlier, for those who might be joining a little bit later, I really do think the best way to get to know the community is by engaging with community members. And so I definitely encourage you to connect with some of our student ambassadors that you can find on the website. And if you're able to join us for some of the events we have during our open house week, the week of July 12th, I encourage you to join for that as well. We'd love to get a chance to answer more of your questions and connect you with some of the members of the community who might be able to connect with you in meaningful ways.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Laurel. So I hope everyone can join me in saying thank you so much to Laurel for coming on and giving her time to give us an insight into the Yale SOM MBA program. Thank you. I'm sure everyone who dialed in really appreciates getting that perspective and having the questions answered. Again, I know that we didn't get to answer every question, especially the ones that came through the YouTube stream. So if there's any questions that are left over, I know that you will be organizing a Zoom session next week on the 22nd. So again, please feel free to dial in on that. That's going to be 10 a.m. Pacific time. So anything that wasn't answered here, feel free to hop on that call next week. Two more things to mention. Again, I'll shamelessly say, can you please thumbs up, like this video if you found it super helpful, or thumbs down if you didn't. We just need to have like a bit of a litmus test as to if we're doing a good job and if we're providing the content that you guys need to help you through the MBA applications process for this upcoming year and any subsequent years that you're looking to apply. So we won't be offended with it, whichever way you go. Just let us know because we like to get a bit of feedback. And please subscribe to the GMAT YouTube channel GMAT Club, YouTube channel, so we can continue to provide you guys with super helpful advice and the community as you go through this very important period of applying to your MBA programs. Apart from that, I just want to say thank you everyone for dialing in. Thank you for taking the time to find out a bit more about Yale SOM. And if there's any more questions that you've got, even if you can't make the Zoom session, I'm sure that Laura will be happy to take questions offline.
Of course. Thank you so much, Linda.
Thank you, Laurel. Have a good day, everyone.